Good morning. Welcome to Shambles Stay at Home Festival. Good morning, Josie.
Hi.
You are a cock a hoop today, I believe. You are filled with vim and vigour and verve.
Yeah, and I just told somebody on Twitter, taxation isn't theft, you dumb prick. So I've had a really great...
Classic child-friendly episode straight in there.
Oh, no.
Normally you've waited at least 10 minutes, so it's had more of an element of surprise. It's been a twist in the Roald Dahl sweary tales.
Yeah, so basically my daughter has, through some freak occurrence, started sleeping through in the past sort of 4 or 5 days, bar one day. And I cannot believe the difference. I imagine if she'd done this the whole of lockdown, it would have been a little skip in the park. It would have been a gentle breeze. How are you?
You do look very different. You look very, very well. And we're ready for all those songs that we know you are wanting to perform today as well. And the tap routine, which you've been putting off for 8 weeks, saying you've had sleep deprivation. You have no such alibi today. I'm good. I've been reading about the religion of ufology, which
I've
is
heard of this. Wow.
No, it's just basically it's a book. I don't know where I put it actually. I started this morning by it's a new book which is all about how UFOs and the cult of UFOs and is a replacement for or part of people's kind of religion. That those glowing orbs in the sky, those kind of things that previously would have been now. I'm not entirely sure I agree with the book. Also because it has one of its advisors is Whitley Strieber, who famously wrote the book Communion about his alien abduction. So, so I've started off the day with alien abduction and a certain amount of kettlebell. So I'm well, and also I have one of my favourite show and tells today. I was just digging through my books, and I'll get this out of the way before I mention Patreon and all of the other things. This is a lovely book from our friend Joanna Neary, who you might have seen on the shows a few times before, and it's called Autobiography of a Lump of Coal. It's one of those beautiful late 90s. I don't know how well you can see. Lovely cover.
Yeah.
And it's all about that. There's the children around the fireplace going, oh, I wish it was a little bit warmer. Yes, stoke the coal, stoke the coal. Hello, I'm a piece of coal. Let me tell you about how I became a piece of coal. Why, how wonderful, a talking piece of coal. So it's a scientific book with an anthropomorphized. Can coal be anthropomorphized? Maybe it can. Anyway, it is.
I've got a show and tell, which is a proof copy of a very exciting book, Brown Baby, by Nikesh, friend of the show. I'm so excited about it. I just started reading it. It's such a beautiful, heartfelt memoir. It's so funny as well. This is my exciting, but you can't get it for months, but just to feed the thrills. But what is that book reminded me of the fact that I have a book which is an old life of Robert Owen, like a very old sort of red book.
As in the naturalist, Robert Owen?
No, as in the guy who set up Lanark, the sort of proto-socialist guy. It's from 1840, I think. And I've never really read it because it's one of those ones that's really, really badly written, but it's just nice to have. My daughter, for some reason, is magnetically attracted to it and keeps taking it out of the shelf and giving it to me. And so I was like, okay, this is some sort of, I should read it. It's so badly written. It's like, upon the age of 19, Robert Owen went to a Smith's where he was paid 7 and 6, but that moved up to 8 and 6. And you're like, babe, I don't need to know how much he earned of a week when he was 19. There's no one reading this going like, yes, but how much did he earn when he was 19 and a half? Like, it's like somebody...
There are some people whose lives you find out that they were the pinnacles of their lives. Small wage changes will take an entire chapter, as we know from Don Estelle from It Ain't Half Hot Mum, his autobiography, which is filled with details about the arguments he had over the development of a gravel path in his particular neck of Rochdale. I love. Maybe your daughter is drawn to the smell, of course, because that can be one of the things of old books, can't it? This one actually is quite low scent for a book that's 140 years old. The Notting Hill Book Exchange, which is one of the things that I miss a great deal at the moment during lockdown, does actually have a sign in it saying, "Please do not smell the books until you have taken them home." Let's mention who's on today. Later on, we have someone who is an opera singer, who is a songwriter, who we've already seen. We've been able to see in her front room the number of instruments she can play. We're joined by Jess Hitchock, who is in Melbourne at the moment. And in a moment, we're going to introduce you to one of my, he's a comedian, he's an actor, he's an author. The first time I saw his chat show in Australia when I visited, I think 2004, 2005, whatever it was, just blew me away. It was brilliant. It was wonderful. And it was weird, and it is Shaun Micallef. We're going to be talking to him very, very shortly, and I'll just quickly do a couple of things, which is mention tomorrow. We've got 2 more shows this week. These are the last of the daily shows. This is next week. We're going to be doing new shows. We're also going to be doing more Patreon-based shows. So do go and look at our Patreon. We've been making free to access stuff for over 10 years now, and we're still trying to make it as much as possible that is free to access. Science Q&A will still be free to access. The Quarantine Comedy Club is still going to be free to access. We will be doing lots of stuff like that. But because we have nothing in our diary for the rest of the year, and maybe next year too, we are having to slightly rethink the way that we're doing stuff. But there's loads of things coming up.
How many weeks have we done daily shows for? Is it 8 or 9?
8 weeks. I think we've averaged, all in all, adding the other shows, it's 9 or 10 shows a week. So it's not bad.
It's not been bad at all.
We've raised £25,000, and that's towards art centres and some of the artists we know as well. So thank you very much, everyone who's been able to contribute. I know not everyone is able to, and that's why we want to try and make sure there's still lots of free to access stuff around. Oh, sorry, Trent's just put up. How many is it, Josie?
106. It's not
106 shows. That's probably too many. We should probably done 2 a week and really thought about them very, very carefully. But that's never the way that we've worked, and that's the way Shambles is in the title. So we are. I think that's all the. I should also mention our gig at the Royal Albert Hall is still going on, but in various people's attics instead. So on the 17th, this Sunday, we have Kobe Smulders, who is you will know from the Marvel Avengers movies, and also How I Met Your Mother. And we have Lem Cisse, and we have British Sea Power, and we have Chris Hadfield and Brian Cox and Helen Chersky and loads and loads and loads of people. So that's we're still making that show. Unlike Brian Adams, who's just been whining. I was meant to be doing the Albert Hall, but it's all unfair. We're still doing our show, Brian. And that's why we've got 2 top Canadians with us in Chris Hadfield and Kobe Smulders there to make up for that. The less whiny Canadians. Very few of them are actually whiny, I've found. Anyway, let's introduce our guest for today, Shaun Micallef. Hello, Shaun. How are you? Shaun Micallef. Hello, Shaun. How are you?
Robert, I'm very well. And Josie, nice to see you. We've just had in Australia a kind of slight relaxing of our lockdown laws. So I've been able to go to the op shop, and as you were showing books before. I want to show you this one, which is I Am Not Spock by Leonard Nimoy.
That's a good cover. I've not seen. Can you hold that up a little bit higher? I want to see the whole of that. Oh yeah. That's a great cover.
But they also have this one, which is I Am Spock. So I like the fact that he can't make up his mind over a period of 20 years.
I also feel like the person who owned both of those books was like, for me, when will there ever be a conclusion? They're both going.
He's in a super position.
I'm not sure they were owned by the same person. I think I might have brought them together. So I'm very happy with that. And the other thing I wanted to show you, is it too early? Can I show you this as well?
No.
This is I bought some art. I watched your Phil Jupiter's episode, and I saw that he made some art. But I did buy that for $20. Can you see that?
Wow.
It was good value, and it's a pirate hat on. And I don't know, I'm moved by it. So does that make it good art?
Mm-hmm.
I think that is, do you know what? That is exactly what you are always looking for. Thrift find that. You find bland pictures of bridges and bubbling streams. To find a Cavalier Parrot poodle or whatever it may be. I'm not entirely sure what the breed was. I know it probably wasn't a poodle. That is magnificent.
I want to recommend the performance artist and writer Scotty, Scottee, does some really brilliant things where he goes to charity shops and he buys those very bland kind of, like a sailing boat or like some flowers, and then he paints antagonistic slogans on top of them and sells and resells them. So everyone should go and check out his work. It's really funny and a good thing to do for harvesting those canvases without the
exactly. Yeah, I'm not drawing on that one though. I can't better that.
No. Oh my God. It would be a sin. It would be a sin.
There is a beautiful thing. There's a bed and breakfast in Plymouth. It's probably no more a long time ago, because this was about 30 years ago. And it was the one where comedians would go and stay when they were doing the tour. And it was a weird one. It had a huge collection of air fresheners, but used air fresheners. All the way up the stairs were various different shapes of air fresheners, all dried to a husk inside. But someone had decided, no, that's part of the decorative process. And then on the walls were these, those kind of pictures of kittens, paintings of kittens, very fluffy, with very pale blue backgrounds. And one night, one of the groups of comedians took each one down and then drew really lurid images of kittens underneath, and then replaced them, so that when people were staring at the picture of the beautiful kittens, little did they know the secret story that lay underneath. And I thought that was kind of almost utterly, a beautiful, pointless gesture.
Yes, that's Dada-esque, isn't it? It's all set up and no punchline.
I love things like
stand-up. My absolute dream. I think punchlines are very overrated.
So, Shaun, I wanted to talk to you about your love of comedy, and also we'll talk about some weird books as well. But just to get this out of the way, first of all, because a lot of the work that you've done has also been kind of satirical and lampooning current affairs, and it is during this period of time. It has felt for the last few years, in fact, that the US, Australia and the UK have for some reason been really drawn to incompetent egotists as their leaders.
Well, that's interesting. You should say that, because I'm kind of happy that you're including Australia in that, because from our perspective, it was like, well, the US and the UK just, you've got the best ones, and ours, we were slightly embarrassed by ours, in a different way. Like they were kind of a little bit boring, we thought. But I'm happy that you're including our present Prime Minister. Do you know his name? We often have to remind people of his name on our show.
No, it's not John Howard anymore, is it?
No, not John Howard. It's Scott Morrison. Scott Morrison. Right.
I always think it's Tony Abbott is the one. An onion, just totally cash, isn't he?
Yeah, that's Tony, but that's a while ago now. We've had another one. We've had another one since then. We had Malcolm Turnbull in the middle, and then we had Scott Morrison now. So yes, the glory days of Tony Abbott eating an onion for no readily apparent reason, they're far behind us. So they're kind of straightening up a bit. We've got a straight man who's our Prime Minister at the moment. We've just actually finished our show. We have a show over here called Mad as Hell, and we'd almost gone halfway through when suddenly the virus hit to the extent that we lost our live audience, and there was a question whether we would continue with the TV show at all. And we were very lucky that we were able to just go on without a live audience. So after 8 or 9 years of having a studio audience responding and giving us feedback and making the show what it was, we suddenly had to go dry and silent in an empty studio for the next 6 weeks. It was a very interesting experience.
How did you find the difference? Did it affect what you wrote and what you chose to perform?
Well, it did eventually, but the very first, for example, we record on a Tuesday, and on the Friday, we were told that we wouldn't have the studio audience next week. So most of it had already been written. So we couldn't really unwrite it or rewrite it to the extent that we might have had we more time. So that was an interesting show, because I kept, just out of habit, stopping for the response. And you just look like the joke died if there's nothing that comes back. But over the next couple of weeks, we rejigged the lines slightly so that the actual end line, or the joke, was probably about 3 or 4 words before the end of the sentence. So there was lots of bridging dialogue that actually helped it sound more conversational and papered over the fact that there wasn't actually any studio audience there. But it was a really interesting experience. I'm trying to find some good in it, because obviously there are lots of artists and comedians, particularly around the world, who kind of just had to down tools during all of this. And I know you guys, and you particularly, Robin, forever touring, as far as I can tell, on social media. You're always out there. To suddenly be denied a living, breathing audience is quite an assault on you as a comedian. You end up kind of, well, I trust the people at home watching this are enjoying it, but you don't get the immediate feedback or validation that you might otherwise get.
I think it's going to be quite. Sorry, Josie.
I was just I've been doing shows on Twitch, and what I have to do is get the audience on the chat panel to write ha 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 ha. And then my brain takes that fractionally. I get like a little hit when I just see it scrolling up, and that's what I have to deal with. That's my only substitute.
You're going to get used to that, and you're going to need that when you go back on stage. You're going to need the visual validation as well as the oral. Yes,
because Nish Kumar, who does the MASH report here, I can't remember whether it was him saying it or whether that somebody else was saying it, talking about the show. But when he was performing it in lockdown, again, it was without the audience, and I think what it led to was them sort of being able to tailor the material more to them than to the audience, if you see what I mean. So actually really, really like make it a more direct speaking from their heart and their sensibilities. Did you find
I think it can become more personal. I think you end up because it's not just me on the show, there are other cast members who pretend to be people I'm interviewing. So we were kind of amusing ourselves, and we were hopefully that is part of the enjoyment at home as well. But the odd thing is that we because we were still in the same studio and still had the same space to fill kind of as a performer, for the home audience watching, everything was exactly the same except there was no laughter. So for them, it just took a few weeks. They kept saying, no, you need to put, in fact, we got this officially too, the suggestion being that we put some canned laughter on, which would be, I just feel I couldn't do that. I don't even like sweetening the show, just even if they're laughing kind of little thing. I reckon if one person laughs, that's kind of fun when one person laughs at a joke, and you can kind of play with that a little bit. But I couldn't imagine. I think that'd be the end of me. I think if I put canned laughter on, and then no one would ever trust me again.
It's very presumptive as well, isn't it? The decision of how loud. I think this joke must be, because then suddenly you become very arrogant, as opposed to someone who, sometimes it's almost when people fall into the spell of what comedy is, they don't see the intention, written on the comedian's face. But they do if they go, do you know what, Shaun Micallef, this is how funny he let me play back that canned laughter. That's how funny he thought that pun was.
Yeah, I mean, there's a slight. Remember the old days of MASH? MASH was a really interesting show because they wouldn't play the canned laughter during the surgery scenes. That obviously made a decision that we won't, that surgery and when people are, potentially dying and the actors are covered in blood, that's not an appropriate time to hear canned laughter. But I remember how shocking it was. I think I might have been about 15 when I was watching it. Suddenly, for the laughs to disappear like that. It was, you just get used to hearing them, even though they're fake. Yeah. And and even with, I think, Get Smart as well, towards the end of its run, decided to abandon its canned laughter while not altering its timing at all. It's like they'd shot it all and they thought, let's forget about the canned laughter. So it was kind of, I don't know, it was. I suppose the same thing happened for a lot of people when The Office started. I think Ricky Gervais show was probably the first big show that everyone watched that didn't have any canned laughter on it. It was ostensibly a sitcom, and that wasn't that long ago.
No, it was that late. That's quite shocking to me.
I think there was People Like Us, which was a kind of slightly similar thing, which was so that. But that's an interesting thing, because I think, and I'm sure someone will pick me up on this, that MASH in the UK, we had a laughter-free version. There were two separate versions of MASH. There was actually a version which did not have the laughter track on it, and as far as I remember, the UK's version that we had on BBC Two did not have that. I think so. It was very weird.
I think the last couple of, from the Australian perspective, I think the last couple of seasons of MASH didn't have a laugh track on it. It's interesting that I didn't realise that you had it from the get-go, that there might have, that there wasn't any laughs on it. Because it feels like you'd have to edit it differently. If it didn't have any laugh track on it, it feels like you'd have to edit it more tightly, I would have thought. Otherwise, it would seem a bit slow.
Yeah, well, we'll Trent, check that up. Check that up. The other one I was thinking was League of Gentlemen. We've had Reese and Mark on this
laugh
before.
Track on it.
Yeah, and that was it was one of their deals, something which I do think is one of the most beautifully shot TV series, and such the fullness of that world. And
it
part
holds
of the
up
deal,
after 25 years so well. It's so fresh still, so interesting.
Does the laugh track jar a bit when you watch it now? If you watch League of Gentlemen now, does it seem weird that it's got a laugh track on it?
Well,
I know it was
at the time. I think to some people it did. I think if it was a world that you were already very keen on, if you were a bit of a horror fan and you had a similar interest, but I think the thing was that they every now and again they'd go, we don't want to have a laughter track, but we do want to have that crane shot. Well, if you want the crane shot, you've got to, and that was the deals that they were doing. I think even to the extent that all of them sometimes would chip in their own money to make sure that the thing looked as they want it to. But that was an interesting, because I don't think it needs a laughter track at all, because I also think that in comedy like that, it is kind of quite a the darkness and the uncanny nature of it means that not everywhere is the same laugh for everyone. As you said, that sometimes there is the single laugh, and sometimes there's the group laugh, and sometimes there's half the room going, hang on a minute, is that, what Stuart Lee plays with a lot, which is,
yes.
That side there really, but they're not, he loves playing with who is understanding it and the alienation for the rest of the audience. He loves to alienate his audience.
There was a very interesting Steve Coogan, after he did Knowing Me, Knowing You, there was a bit of a break, and then he came back with a second version of Alan Partridge, and I think it was
I'm Alan Partridge.
It was I'm Alan Partridge, but he had there must have been enough of a studio component to it for him to have a live studio audience. But it was the one that followed that one didn't have it at all. It seemed like there was a transitional series that he did where it could have easily gone without the laugh track.
This is so funny, because when we started talking about laugh, where for me it seems so modern and yet so odd to have a laugh track, with League of Gentlemen and I'm Alan Partridge, and thinking about the fact that it's almost like, it's like this thing has got strapped onto it something so anachronistic, and it's sort of struggling its way into the future. But I know that I'm Alan Partridge has a laugh track on it because it jars with me to know it.
Yes, and it was odd. It was odd because I was sitting there watching it, thinking, is there an audience somehow watching this as it's being performed? Because the timing seemed so right for the laughs that were happening. There was obviously an OB or an outside component as well, which I'm assuming was played in. But with League of Gentlemen, none of it would have been performed in front of a live audience. That would have just been played.
Oh, actually, some of it was, I think, because you've got a few,
like Little Britain.
Yeah.
So they were performed. Oh gosh, being really ignorant of this. So some of it would have been in front of, and then would they have just
because you've got things like the Toad Family and all of those people. All of those are sets and studio sets, BBC studio sets. I should say, by the way, that we've put a lot of pressure on Trent, because obviously this, when it goes out on YouTube after the live version, will have a track placed on it in the most anachronistic moments possible. We've checked, by the way, and it is right. MASH on BBC Two had no laugh track. CBS, it was contractual. CBS demanded that MASH had a laughter track. So CBS, it was in the contract that it had to have a laughter track. BBC Two showed it without. So I presume that within the writers, the intention had not been to have a laughter track.
Fascinating.
So with canned laughter as well, that it wasn't necessarily somebody just literally artificially putting in laughs for the laughs. It would have been an audience reacting to that show, them being recorded and placed in.
Which one, MASH? Which one, MASH?
No, just in general. Like, was there a set type of way of doing it?
Well, there was up until and beyond MASH, I think there was a machine, wasn't there? There was a very famous machine that everybody used. All the laughs were the same. All these people were dead. They were culled from the Dick Van Dyke Show, I think, and also even some earlier shows around there.
Laughs.
Yeah, they're all for Dick Van Dyke, and I'm happy with that because I figure they're pure, joyful laughs. But it was at a point, and maybe it certainly wouldn't have been used in the UK for its productions. I would have thought there was a proud tradition coming out of Variety where you would simply perform whatever you were going to perform, if it was a comedy, in front of an audience. I don't think there would have been too many television shows coming out of Britain that would have had actual canned laughter on it. He sweetened a bit, but I would have thought most of them. I'm thinking the 50s, like Norman Wisdom's show, for example, or they would have all had studio audiences, wouldn't they? I mean,
there's an interesting. There was a stand-up series that was done that when it was filmed, it turned out the room it was filmed in, it just didn't work. It wasn't working. And they did have to crowbar in the laughs. And it was a really interesting thing to watch if you knew about this. Series? But I'll tell you afterwards, just in case. I'll tell all of you afterwards. I think I'm right in saying there was a BBC stand-up show, the stand-up show, that was recorded in Edinburgh during the Fringe, and it was a really hot room, as so many of them are, and it just was not conducive to really. And you can see the disconnect between the look on the comedian's face and the level of laughter. And it's a really interesting thing. So you can see someone sweating and panicking, and yet the experience we hear is someone storming it. And I mean, that's the beautiful thing when you sometimes see that audience shot, the difficulty of an audience shot where all 5 people are laughing. There's always 4 people laughing and one person there going, And I remember watching it as a friend of mine was directing a stand-up show, going, no, that one's frowning. No, that one's just eating peanuts. You know, that whole thing. We just need 5 people who are in tandem laughing together.
Well, I think that happened even in the US, because I remember watching, Bob Hope specials, and he would make a joke, and then he would look at the audience and he'd make a crack about how they didn't get it. But as you say, for us at home, they'd filled the gap with a canned laugh. So he should have just shut up. He would have gotten away with it. And you're right about the cutaways to the audience were always, they clearly weren't from that moment anyway. They must have had a store of these reaction shots that they just cut to, a bit like the way Python used to cut to the old ladies applauding. It was that factory made, I think, a lot of those shows.
Oh, I love things like that. I'd never imagined we were going to do a half-hour thing all about laughter, but this has been. I love doing stuff like this.
Very interesting.
There's a great story, by the way, and I wish I could remember the title. It's by Harlan Ellison, who had one of the most incredible minds in Fecund in terms of the number of stories he wrote. Really amazing writer. And he wrote one which was all about someone who's basically their afterlife was the existence of their laugh, that they were someone who was within that canned laughter track. And it was as if their spirit was within that recording. I'll try and find out, which I think it might be in the collection Shatterday, but I might be wrong on that. We're going to take a quick break now and have some music from someone who is also you're in Melbourne, aren't you, Shaun?
I am, yes.
Yeah, someone else who's in Melbourne. So this is the distance is crazy, isn't it? This is as I mentioned before.
Heartsick. I was supposed to get to go there last month, and it's just I kept imagining walking up and down roads in the city and just trying to pretend I was there.
But that's what you have to do before each Skype thing, because we do so many of these, is walk just a little bit around, your home. And then as you sit back down to the webcam, go, and now I am in Melbourne. And it's, just somewhere psychosomatically you are. Anyway, this person has my favourite cushion that we've had on in all 8 weeks. So before we even hear her singing, as you mentioned before, she's an opera singer, she's a singer, she's a songwriter. Her music is available at Jess Hitchock Music. And Jess, how are you?
I'm good, thanks. How are you guys going?
Good. Yeah, we were just saying that about the lack of. Did you have quite a heavy period of gigging over what has now become the lockdown?
Yeah, I actually was tuning in beforehand, and I totally agree with Shaun. Playing to empty theatres and studios for musicians as well is a total change of pace. It's really weird, and you're sort of staring at a camera lens, which is something that doing live performances, you're never doing that. And so it's actually taken me a little while to get into the routine of, staring at myself basically while I'm playing instead of staring at an audience, or just sitting in an empty room and nobody's there and you have to rely on people commenting online to sort of give you the reactions that you normally would get from performing. So yeah, it's been really strange.
And also acoustically, it must be different. Like if you're performing and there's no kind of, it just isn't sucked up by the people. It just kind of bounces around.
No absorption whatsoever. And my voice rings a lot. So I have a very projecting voice, and I played it to a theatre actually, and where they were filming for a writers' festival, and instead they decided to actually just put all the seats away. And so I was just playing in this sort of empty box,
like an aircraft hangar,
pinging everywhere. I was like, oh God, I hope it sounds okay, translated well across online. But for me, acoustically, it sort of sounded like I was singing in a huge bathroom.
Yeah.
I think there is something, even though for the performer you don't get that sensation. I think the one thing which is, even on the kind of the low budget way that a lot of these things are done, there is still that immediacy. One of the reasons we started doing this was that we're getting messages from people going, oh man, we were going to come to this gig and that gig, and you realise that loss of connection. And strange enough, the bit that we're all just looking down a lens and we're all in, you know, our attic or a front room or whatever it is, I think in some ways it's not the same, but it is still giving people something. And the way that, you know, that there's a beautiful thing in watching someone sing a wonderful song and then just in the background seeing someone open the door, look in and go, oh no, he's just doing his song. And these are the things that you don't get in the theatre so much. And I think that it still gives.
I think being on screen has definitely created more of a personal relationship with audience members, because you don't get time to have conversations. And although you're having conversations with yourself most of the time via screen, you don't get time to do that sort of thing in the gig, because you just sort of go, oh, on to the next song, on to the next song. And it's been an interesting, my boyfriend has walked in while I've been doing stuff lots, or something, you know, something's arrived from the post and they're knocking furiously at the door, and I'm like, be quiet. It's been.
Don't you think? Yeah, sorry. Don't you think the experience, the rawness of it, of whatever you're doing, whether it's comedy or music, anything done on this particular platform, is a great equaliser, because everybody looks the same. You don't get the assist and support you might from a very well post-produced piece of art, you know, where you've got your makeup or you've got you've got your special effects or whatever. Everybody from Brad Pitt to you, Robin, that we all kind of look the same in our.
Hang on. Don't just stop there. Sorry. The most extreme difference. Well, this is Trent. Cut the feed for Shaun. It's not working out at all as a relationship. No, I know exactly what you mean.
Yeah. It kind of. It's very egalitarian. And maybe that's what you're saying, Jess. Maybe people at home who are going to relate to you or to Josie or Robin in a different way, in exactly the same way to each other. I think that might be a good thing that's come out of this.
I think so. And also, I mean, we talked about this before, but I actually really love seeing the little bits and pieces of people's houses and where they spend their time. And, you know, I can see all of your books behind you, Robin, and same with you, Shaun. And I love getting a little insight into what's happening in other people's houses, because, you know, these are people you don't normally get to go and spend time with at home. You just see them at gigs. Look at that teddy.
I don't normally have my teddy bear. My 51-year-old teddy bear, Snubby, that was a previous show and tell and is now on the show and tell pile just behind.
Nice. Oh, look at this.
Love it. Yeah.
Okay, I'll tell you what, you can tell that Shaun's been in the business a long time. Straight from that insult to then, I'll tell you what, plugging a book will feed his performer's ego. Excellent work.
Yeah.
Jess, what's the first song you're going to sing for us today?
I'm going to sing you a song. It's called Running in the Dark. And I actually wrote this song after I had watched both versions of A Star is Born. I saw the newest one recently, and then I sort of didn't realise that it was actually a remake. And so I went back and I watched the first one because I love old movies. And it was...
I've got a shocker for you. Which first one did you watch?
What?
How many are there?
There are 4.
I watched the one with who is it? Barbara Streisand or whoever.
No.
Original.
James Mason and Judy Garland, and there is that's the second version, but that is the best one. When she says, "I am Mrs. Norman Maine" at the end. Whoa! I promise you, you are in for such a treat, and it also means you can get an extra verse out of this song.
What's the first one?
How many versions are there? 4.
First one is 4. There's Frederick March, and do you remember, Shaun? It's Frederick and Lionel Stander is in it as well from TV's
Carol Lombard.
It might be, yeah. And Lionel Stander from TV's
That would be the 1930s, I'm guessing. Probably if it was Frederick March. Yeah.
Yeah, I think
it's an old standard. That story is and I'm sure there are silent movie versions of it as well. We should get Trent onto it immediately.
This is like when you find out a version of a song that you love is just a cover version, and then it's unbearable.
And then you're devastated. That happens to me all the time. Especially if the cover is better than the original. I feel bad for that person then that somebody covered their song better than them. That might happen to me in the future.
When you see people hearing the original version of Leonard Cohen's Hallelujah, which I love, but they've heard Britain's Got Talent sing it or whatever. They've heard it as a kind of, what I would say as a cruise liner standard.
It very well.
Yeah, Jeff Buckley is the version the go-to version. I don't know about Britain's
thank you.
Talent. Who thinks that? But yeah, this song is based on basically the storyline of those movies, those 4 movies that I didn't realize were. And or just about being in love with somebody that you shouldn't be. So yeah, should I play?
Yes, please. Ladies and gentlemen, please welcome to her front room and yours, Jess Hitchock.
Thanks. Will I find myself out on the road again? I have seen it all, 'cause I've been here before. I remember you like it was yesterday. You haven't changed at all, but I know I shouldn't stay. 'Cause I'm a glutton for the drama that you bring. I'm a fixer now like I have always been. And when you speak to me so soft and low, I remember why I loved you all those years ago. There were steps we took that we can't take back. Promises were made for our lives were in a wreck. Then I saw your face, familiar and scared, and I knew I'd never leave you whilst in this despair. 'Cause I'm a glutton for the drama that you bring. I'm a fixer now like I have always been. And when you speak to me so soft and low, I remember why I loved you. And I know what I can give you, but you'll take it all at once. And I feel I'm lost without you. But when I'm with you, it's like running in the dark. 'Cause I'm a glutton for the drama that you bring. I'm a fixer now like I have always been. And when you speak to me so soft and low, I remember why I loved you all those years ago. I remember why I loved you all those years ago. Thanks, guys.
Thank you so much. That was great. That was really beautiful. This is what I love as well, is when we have these moments like this and realizing that people in the next door house get a little kind of session all the time. I think people who live next door to you are very lucky. I didn't know how many friends I had who owned drum kits and have decided to learn the drums during the session. That has been a far more negative experience for their neighbours.
Yeah, my neighbour actually, I'm good friends with her, and she always texts me every now and then and says, "You're singing, it's so beautiful." And I like to sing late at night, unfortunately, because that's when I feel most creative. And so I sing quietly, but she's like, "Oh, it's so soothing hearing you through the walls."
No, it's you are a good neighbour for lockdown. Thank you very much. We'll hear another song, I think, at the end of the show as well.
It's one of those things where, for us, like getting to see you perform live is just so thrilling. It's as good as being in. Well, it's probably not as good as being in the room, but it's nearly as good as being in the room.
Wouldn't it be a great surprise if it turns out we are in the next door room?
We're in your kitchen.
The acoustics are good, Jess, too. If you're worried, your room sounds great.
Oh, cool. That's awesome. Yeah, it's a bit of a box, this room. It's actually no window. It's like an old terrace house. There's only a skylight. So I think it's actually good for soundproofing, which is nice.
No, that sounded absolutely brilliant, and we'll, as we mentioned as well, Jess Hitchock music is way. 32 film called What Price Hollywood. So there we go. That's your lesson in. And I really do recommend, by the way, anyone who has not seen the James Mason and Judy Garland version. I mean, James Mason is one of my favourite actors. Judy Garland is, of course, magnificent as well. It is a really brilliant, heart-wrenching, and I personally think the greatest version of that story. So worth watching. I thought we could talk.
What you've done is anyone who's not seen A Star is Born. You basically said, "Oh, your homework is 15 hours. It's not just 4. 15 hours of homework."
It could have been 4 Star is Born or 1 Tarkovsky. I was thinking, what am I going to give the people today? I've got a couple of, but because last time that we met up when we were all together in Melbourne, we were talking about novels, and this is the best one that I've picked up since. I think this was when I was in Christchurch about 10 months ago, walking down one of those weird streets with just like kind of chain burger places, drive-in burger places, and then there was a shop which I think probably did electrical repair, but also was just filled with books. And they were interesting and weird. And when I walked in, the man said, "Thank you so much for coming in. Would you like a lolly?" and all this kind of stuff. So it was great.
It was like you died and gone to heaven. That's what your version of heaven is.
It was books and lollies. That's all I'm after.
But also just the idea that as you show up, they say, "Thanks for coming in, Robin. We've been waiting for you."
Yeah, and then as I turned back, it's disappeared. There's nothing. It's been knocked down. That bookshop burnt down 60 years ago. As well as getting a quite a nice R.S. Murdoch first edition, because the balance of the universe must remain. R.S. Murdoch on one hand, the film tie-in novel of Brian De Palma's Phantom of Paradise.
Oh wow! Wow,
which is quite a treat, because that is obviously there's not that many copies of this. It's one of those film tie-ins which includes reasonably. Oh, there we go. There's a few. I'm not going to open it too much in case the pages fall out. They are solid now, but it's this was.
He sold his soul for rock and roll.
It was basically a rock and roll remake of Phantom of the Opera. Paul Williams, who wrote, amongst other things, Rainbow Connection. Paul Williams, who was a big star, and then had that thing where he just vanished. My brother-in-law used to have all his albums, and then he wrote Rainbow Connection and various songs for the Muppets, stuff like that. Great songwriter. And he plays the villain in it. And this is so that's the best film tie-in, because we were talking before. You have a film tie-in of the Rasputin-based movie, Australian movie Harlequin.
Yes, I do. Yeah, well, my wife does, and it's around. I won't get up and find it, but it is just behind me, actually up there. These books are they're novelizations, aren't they? Someone gets the screenplay and they fill in all the gaps and turn it into paragraphs and describe things, and it's not really writing, though, is it? I noticed that my sons have got a Back to the Future film book tie-in by a fellow called George Gipe, Gipe. If you want to check him out, check out his oeuvre, but he does tend to only write novelizations.
It's very interesting, because another one of this is, rather than a novelization of a film, this is a novelization of a band. You might know this one. This is Moorcock and Butterworth's Time of the Hawk Lords, which is where Hawkwind are turned into, it's a future, dystopian future, and Hawkwind are then partially fictionalized. And so I can't remember who Lemmy is in this. Baron Brock, who is actually David Brock, lead guitar, 12-string guitar, synthesizer, organ and vocals. The Thunder Rider, that's actually Nick Turner, sax, oboe, flute and vocals. Colour, Count Motorhead, Lemmy, bass and vocal. And it's just this, and there were two of these.
How does that work? How does that work? Does that work? Oh, sorry, Josie.
No. I was just being silly. Please, what were you going to say?
Well, I don't think I was going to be any more serious about it, but I'm just curious as to what that is a time for. Does it connect with an album in some way, or is it it's just something?
Yeah, it's just I think Michael Moorcock might have been friends with Hawkwind, though. From what I can gather, though Michael Moorcock is in the big print, Michael Moorcock, who again, incredible output by Michael Moorcock, and some brilliant stuff in the Jerry Cornelius novels and things like that. But I think he was less involved than the size of his name of this would suggest, and it was predominantly written by the other guy, Butterworth. I've forgotten actually even his. In fact, I don't think I even ever tell you There we go. Michael Butterworth. Author's note: while the characters in this story are based on actual people, we wish to make it clear the description of these characters are entirely fictitious and based on roles used by members of Hawkwind on stage and recorded performances. I find that a beautiful addition to the universe of.
That's very nice. Can I put a question to you guys? Because I have two books up there in the shelf. One, and they're both written by a fellow called Peter George. One is called Dr. Strangelove, and the other one is, I can't quite, my glasses aren't strong enough to tell me what it is, but it was the book upon which Dr. Strangelove was based. So Peter George wrote this book that Kubrick used. It might have even been. I'll find it in a minute. I'll find it in a minute for you. So Kubrick, Terry Southern, and I think Peter George did the screenplay for Dr. Strangelove.
Trent has just written Red Alert, and either that's the title of the book or we're all in serious trouble.
No, he's quite right. Red Alert. In fact, I think that book was turned into a film and played straight as well as being adapted into Dr. Strangelove. But then Peter George, after Dr. Strangelove was made, he went and rewrote his original book using not only his original book but also the screenplay that Kubrick and Terry Southern did.
He canonised the screenplay. He was like, "Yep, this is all canon. This is all canon. I did it. Yes." That's amazing.
Yeah, 2 film tie-ins for the price of one.
That's great. Now I know what I'm going to be looking for this afternoon. Thinking of Kubrick, have you seen the film Room 237?
Yes.
I have not. No, I haven't.
It's so weird, isn't it, Josie?
Yes, it's very meditative. It's lots of people kind of talking about hang on, it's about The Shining, and it's about people's
it's basically
to
lots of different people's intense interpretation of what The Shining means.
Yes.
So there's one guy who says, because there is this one tin can in one shot where the child is looking at Scatman Crothers, which is in geometrically perfect, and it has a picture of a Native American on it. It turns out that is the starting point for realizing that the entire film is merely it's predominantly about the genocide of the indigenous people of the United States of America. And then the next person comes up straight away and says, well, you see, the reason that I realized this was entirely about what happened in Nazi Germany was looking at the German typewriter. Now, the German typewriter, and then you have another person who comes up and he goes, and you'll see in this particular shot, as the character moves, I forget, it's Barry Nelson, as he moves round, you'll see that Kubrick has very carefully made it appear that the paper stack there eventually looks as if it's his erection, right? There's all of these.
It's like the Blind Men and the Elephant, isn't it?
Yeah.
They're all touching a different piece.
How extraordinary. Someone's decided to film these nutcases.
Yeah, but a lot of them they're academics. They're people they've seen their form of academia. So they see a number in shot and they go, why would 42 appear in that corner? And then there's someone else who's repeatedly drawn maps of the Overlook Hotel and why it doesn't actually make sense. So all of these maps overlaid, and yeah, it's a really, when people find their own personal religion, and for some people it will be a certain film, and they go, this is.
I wonder what Kubrick would make of that, because The Shining's 1981. Am I right there? 1981, I think, around about then. So VHS probably hasn't kicked in. I think that was probably a couple of years later. This ilk of director or filmmaker that, for all intents and purposes, once the film's out there, people will see it at cinemas, and maybe, I don't think he was too keen on television, so presumably he thinks, okay, well, it'll be re-released at some point, but people aren't going to be watching it in the way that people do obsessively watch films now, where you may well have seen a film in your life over 50 or 60 times. It's very interesting that, that now, if you make a film now, you could probably deliberately put all those things in there, hoping there'll be some sort of online chat about them, whether it's the 42 in the corner or the penis shaped piece of paper or whatever it is. But back in the old days, this stuff wasn't even thought about too deeply, and I would say probably Kubrick would be in that group too. But he certainly wanted some structural integrity to his work, and obviously thought very deeply about it. But I don't think he thought as deeply about it as the people that are in this particular film.
Yeah, it's sorry, Josie.
No, I was going to say, you're never going to analyse your work to the extent that, are you? You just don't have the time because you're making it and moving on, So you can't.
Yeah, I guess you know the answer too. I mean, I guess you probably come to a conclusion about what the scene means or what the imagery is all about, and you don't really need to think of multiple interpretations or what other people might read into it or project onto it. It's a strange echo chamber now.
I'd really recommend it. It's different, and also your screen, which is quite a nice technique. So you hear them talking, you see the maps, you see the different shots and all of that kind of thing, but you never then have that extra. Oh, they look like it removes that form of judgment, which it's kind of very interesting. So that's another thing I'd recommend. I was going to ask you a little bit because the last time we've talked to you, you're a great fan of the kind of classic slapstick comedians, and we were talking beforehand. Just this week we put out the 50th anniversary conversation, which I had with the Goodies in January, which of course was a big celebration and does have some a lot of sadness to it now, but it's still, that night was a great celebration. And for you, growing up in Australia, I mean, that was the thing, is when the announcement of Tim's death came, the number of people from Australia that I was communicating with, because they mean so much, don't they? There.
Oh yeah. Well, from let's see, I'm now 57, but when I was about 15, 14 years old, we would arrive home from school and the Goodies would be on television at about 4:30 or 5 o'clock in the afternoon, and that would be every night of the week. And I'm not sure whether they were still then making that. I'm trying to think how old I would have been. This would have been in the 70s, late 70s. They still have been making their program, would they not, for probably, they moved around a bit. They went to Thames and they went back to the BBC, I think. But there were a few different versions of the Goodies series over about a 9-year period. But as far as the Australian Broadcasting Corporation was concerned, it was in syndication. So you would probably see you'd see everything within a year, and then you'd start to see your favourite episodes, and you'd sort of wait for them to turn up. And at one point, I think, because Monty Python was on it, you'd have to wait until 8:30 or 9 o'clock at night to watch them.
A bit racier, wasn't it? It was a bit sometimes.
Yes, it was there was something a bit forbidden about Python. So and it was only on once a week too. That's the other thing. It was a bit rarer. So we kind of were interested in that, but it was a special event booking of the television set in the house, whereas the Goodies was just ours. It was just available at all the times. They were our friends. We were kind of felt a bit closer to them as a result. So whenever when Tim Brooke-Taylor was with us, and certainly Graham Garden and Bill Oddie, whenever they would come out and visit Australia during the 80s and 90s, and even I think as recently as this last decade, and they were just hugely attended. They'd play the Sydney Opera House and fill it out. Wow. And this is just with a Q&A session, wow. And they'd show clips and bits and which we were familiar with. Yeah, it was a victory lap, and we were very happy for them to run around and wave to us. But one of my great regrets is that I once got an email from Graham Garden, and my name had been suggested to him for an Australian version of a radio show that he does over in the UK. Is it called? I'm sorry, I haven't a clue. Have I got the name? Yeah. And there was some talk of maybe doing that over here as a radio program, or probably adapt it to a television program. And I for whatever reason, I think I was already doing something at the time. I couldn't do it, or even just continue to have conversations with him. I think that would have been enough for me, even if it had never been made. It'd been nice to just email back and forward. But in my limited experience, he seemed a lovely man, and I always kind of warmed to him. Of all of them, I think I probably warmed to Graham Garden the most, maybe because I looked a bit like him at school.
They are all of them. And Graham, of course, is as a big fan of silent movies, I mean, he does the Slapstick Festival as well. That's one of the reasons we've so often done goodies events, and they're always sold out, and people are always so delighted. But his enjoyment when we were showing some of the clips for the 50th anniversary, in fact, all of them, watching the replication of moments of Keaton and moments of Chaplin and all of those things, there is still such a delight in that. And I wondered if in any way that was part of your journey, or when you started to realise the importance of people like Keaton.
Well, I know that it was even before then, because in Australia we used to, before we had no option but to watch sport on the weekend, they would often run a movie matinee. They would have a couple of films, and sometimes they would be those ones that Robert Youngson put together. Now, Robert Youngson used to do these compilation films using, I guess, what he assumed were public domain silent movie footage. And I think one of them was called The Great Chase, or The Great Locomotive Chase, or it might have just been called Chase. But it was mainly it was a lot of Senate footage of people running after other people and chasing each other in cars. But most of it was from The General, which was, of course, the wonderful film of Buster Keaton. And I remember watching that a few times, because it'd turn up once or twice a year, and a lot of Laurel and Hardy. Robert Youngson did a lot of Laurel and Hardy compilations. Terrible music he'd put over them, but it was kind of our only access to them, because you wouldn't see a full or complete silent movie on television, and it certainly wouldn't be playing at the local cinema when you're a kid. So I had a pretty good working knowledge of silent movie films and classic gags. So when the goodies came along, I felt very clever, because I was able to go to school the next day and say, oh yes, well, of course, in 1926 Buster Keaton did that joke, but they'd always do something extra with it. There'd always be the goodies were paying homage. They weren't just nicking the jokes.
Mm. Well, that is, I mean, what I find amazing is watching old Keaton movies, some of which are very melancholy now. There was one that we showed, and I've totally forgotten that. It's not called Our Relations, but it's where he returns to the South to reclaim what he thinks is a beautiful mansion, ends up just being a shed. Our Hospitality, of course. Yes, and we showed that at Bristol Cathedral in January. And it probably had, with a brilliant live accompaniment by the European Silent Movie Orchestra, absolutely great. Wow. But it's actually, there's some great gags in it, but most of it is a melodrama. And that's a really interesting thing with Keaton. Chaplin, certainly less so, and Harold Lloyd, not at all. But with Keaton, there is something where you can see why Beckett was kind of drawn to his stuff.
Mm.
Well, all comedians
yes, I have.
In the end, didn't they? You all get melancholy in the end.
Well, he kind of, I mean, even The General's pretty straight for the first 10 minutes or so. I mean, there's little character things that are done, but it doesn't really start kicking along as a big slapstick film until after the train pulls out of the station. Or he's trying to sign up to join the Civil War. There's a lot of, I think, as far as I could tell, just as an observer, he did seem to put a lot of stock, and this must have been instinct, into setting up the character. And even though the character of Buster Keaton was kind of, it was close enough from film to film that you would recognise certain things and know that Buster would do certain things. He did, as in Our Hospitality or the General, even Our Relations, he would actually go to some effort to say, well, this character, in addition to just my usual stuff, is also this person in this film for this story. And you're right, you didn't get that with Harold Lloyd. Harold Lloyd actually put together a compilation of his own in 1965 called The World of Harold Lloyd. And that's a great, if you can't afford all the Criterion collection of the Harold Lloyd films, in fact, it's been very difficult to get the Harold Lloyd films, but I think they're out now, maybe it's a Criterion collection. But if you just wanted a nice sort of compilation of his best jokes, then that film's not bad to go to. Just as if you're looking for Buster Keaton stuff and you can't afford to buy all the various DVDs, Lindsay Anderson, I think at least narrated and maybe put together a wonderful 3-part documentary series called Buster Keaton, A Hard Act to Follow, which, if you can get that, is also a great compendium of all those great Buster Keaton prints. So they're all pretty crisp and clear, the vision.
They are great. They are really worth. I mean, I hope the Slapstick Festival is able to be up and running in January. I'll just give a plug to the fact they're putting up stuff at the moment online and doing watch parties and things. And if you can support the Slapstick Festival, it's always a wonderful thing. We've run out of time, which is we've had a 40-minute lecture between all three of us on the nature of canned laughter, and I don't know if we've moved any further with our understanding of canned laughter. But I hope you've enjoyed our canned laughter module.
It was interesting.
No, I like it. I genuinely. That's the thing is, this is the difference between having an audience and not having an audience. Is sometimes when we do things which are, well, all the time when we do things which are exceptionally niche, we've never managed to, shy away from being exceptionally niche. You do think, I wonder what everyone thinks, and then you get people going, wow, that's a really fascinating look at canned laughter. Yeah, I love stuff like that, and I do. I think it's all of those different things that. I think it's because we're all fans, aren't we? You know what I mean? It's like you don't lose that. I mean, that's true of Graham as well. I think and people like Barry Cryer and Bill and Tim. That they're people who still love watching the work of everyone else. And going.
Yeah, I agree. And you can, if it's any good, and the stuff you're introduced to as a child, you have a further appreciation of as you get older, and you can see it from many, many different angles. And while you necessarily don't want to go as far as some of those Kubrick fans you were talking about, comedy is endlessly fascinating to me. And it's also, great to speak with like-minded people who are also as enthusiastic. And, if that's shared with your audience, then that's got to be a good thing. That's a shared experience which are all being denied at the moment.
Do you have one particular film that you find yourself going, what am I going to watch tonight? You know what? I mean, like what I watched the other night, which I would, again, highly recommend to everyone, is because it's just joy. It is just pure joy, is James Stewart in Harvey, which I think is the famous, the puka, the giant rabbit. It's just joy. And for a time like this, sometimes, do you have certain films you go, that's the one I need now? I'm going back to that.
Well, there's It's a Wonderful Life, which is a film that I don't necessarily only watch at Christmas. I actually, that's probably the favourite one. But in terms of comedy, I would always go for the Philadelphia Story with Cary Grant and James Stewart and Katharine Hepburn. That to me is one of the. And there, you talk about slapstick. There it is. I think this is probably late 30s, early 40s. I can't quite remember when it was, but. Without too much effort, that slapstick is still in that film. That is in that Bringing Up Baby as well. Those two films I would happily watch as a double feature.
Bringing Up Baby. What about you, Josie?
Well, I mean, It's a Wonderful Life and the Philadelphia Story are two that I will watch pretty much every year. I think each of them because one is, and also for me, it's like. The nature of the dialogue is so thrilling to me, and I yearn for that kind of dialogue in modern things. I yearn for that kind of sort of withering female character as well, withering put downs. What I've been watching myself in lockdown is mainly children's television, and I have a lot of very strong opinions about it. Very strong opinions about the political orientations of various characters, the secret lives of various characters, whether or not certain people who wrote it should be put in prison. So that's been most of my life. I also have rewatched all of Succession, which I would not have thought I would be drawn to in lockdown, but it's been absolutely a joy to rewatch it and to find it. I just want to watch it again straight away, because each time I've watched it I've been like, how did I miss that joke, how did I miss that line, how did I miss that incredible look? I think it's still one of the best pieces of television of the past 20-30 years. It's wonderful.
Brilliant. Thank you so much. I was actually Peppa Pig. Watch out for the fact on YouTube there are a lot of lurid, edited Peppa Pig. My son's favourite fact is that Peppa Pig, there's an episode that was banned in Australia because it says "be nice to spiders," and obviously that's fine
Mr.
for a UK-based.
Mr. Skinny Legs. I know the episode. I've watched it many times. My strong opinions on Peppa Pig. Everyone says that Daddy Pig is a Tory, right? Everyone thinks it's hilarious to say Daddy Pig is a Tory. Daddy Pig, I've been watching it. Daddy Pig's not a Tory, right? Daddy Pig is a comrade. His wife is a Tory. All they do is mock him and belittle him. It's a nightmare. Daddy Pig is the embodiment of living as a socialist in modern Britain, mocked by all around him. Thank you for coming.
Module 2, following the canned laughter module, will be Peppa Pig tomorrow at 10:30 a.m. Thank you so much for joining us, Shaun.
Pleasure. Nice to see you.
Thank you so much.
I wish we could. Yeah, so many more things we could have talked about, and we're gonna just quickly mention again Patreon. We're putting up a new Patreon, by the way, as well. I'm not sure if it's up yet. Trent will probably a little speech bubble will pop up for me in a moment, but we've got a new Patreon, which is for everything that we're making, and we are trying to make as much as possible. Some of you, I know some of you enjoyed the Richard Feynman documentary that we made recently as well. Patreon.com/Cosmic Shambles, I think that's right, is where you can go and find out. So if you can support us via that, we can keep making loads of stuff. And there's a tip jar at the bottom if you can't be bothered to go through that. And if you haven't got the either wherewithal or the resources, that's fine as well. Thank you so much for joining us, everyone. Josie, have a lovely day. I'll see you tomorrow.
I will. You too. Everyone, have a nice evening.
And Jess, promise not to give you any addendum at this time and going, well, actually, Jess, your song is not about. We're not the whatever. There's no more footnotes, okay? I promise you that. Jess, what is your what's your final song?
This song is called "By the Sea," and I wrote it down on the coast of down near Anglesey, which is down in the Victorian coast. And yeah, it's just about missing living by the ocean. So yeah, no real anecdotes could be made about that, I suppose. And I'm warning you, there is a whistling solo in this, which I will perform. So yeah, be prepared for that.
Brilliant. Thank you so much. And remember, as I mentioned before, Jess Hitchock Music. For all of you out there, if you can, try and support as many of the live acts that are not out there doing live, who are still making songs and making work, because then it means when all of this is lifted, all of that art is still going to exist and still be available for everyone. Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to a second time to their front cushion. I shouldn't say that because I think people are going to keep focusing on that. This is just such a good cushion. Beautiful. Here is Jess Hitchock. Thanks very much.
I want to live by the ocean. I want to swim in the sea. My heart, it belongs to the waves and the breeze. Oh, I want to live by the sea. I want to hear the birds sing. I want that to be each morning. I want to feel the sand at my feet. Oh, I want to live by the sea. Mountains, yes, they sure are pretty, but I hear crashing waves, they're calling me. The wide brown land is always there, but I hear a song. It echoes in my soul. I hear a song. It's the sea calling me home. I want to look at horizons over the deep blue sea. Sunset or sunrise, I don't mind. I just want to live by the sea. Mountains, yes, they sure are pretty, but I hear crashing waves, they're calling me. The wide brown land is always there, but I hear a song. It echoes in my soul. I hear a song. It's the sea. The city streets have helped me for many years, but I'm not sure how much longer that will be. The shade of a building won't compare to any tree that sits on the bank of a river that leads to the sea.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Brilliant.
Home, stay at home festival.